Jai Sat Gurudev. A warm welcome to all present here. A warm welcome to all present here and those joining us on the Facebook Live. My name is Srinivas Patnaik, a regular practitioner of Vihangam Yoga meditation for more than 4 years. And I have been following other formats of meditation as well from the past 30 years of my life. I'm a marine engineer and I operate and manage a few diverse businesses in maritime and trading. Why am I telling about myself? There are so many people out there who are very successful in their own perspective, self-made people who rose from rags to riches. The me I introduced a while ago is my education, experience after being born into this world, and what my body is doing in this birth to keep itself nourished, healthy, and defend itself from oncoming diseases. Is that all about me? Well, that's a question that all of us face at some time or the other. Before I tell you more about today's talk and the speaker, let me introduce you all to the Vihangam Yoga Singapore and its parent organization based in India. The agenda. Before progressing any further, I would like to give you a brief about how this 1 hour session is scheduled. We will begin with telling you a little bit more about the Vihangam Yoga organization and its Singapore chapter before we commence this session with Swagat and Mangalgan. We shall then introduce the speaker and delve into a very powerful section of this Swarved Satsang in English for about 40 minutes. This will be followed by a Q&A session, then concluding remarks by Subhashji and a word of thanks. We intend to close sharp by 12 p.m. Let me introduce you to Vihangam Yoga. It's a pioneer in advanced meditation training aimed at uplifting human life in all aspects. It is a non-governmental organization by the name Sadguru Sadafal Dev Vihangam Yoga Sansthan that was established in the year 1924 by His Holiness Sadguru Sadafal Devji Maharaj. He discovered this wonderful meditation technique after 17 years of strenuous meditation practice. Today, under the guidance of the present Sadguru, His Holiness Sri Swatantra Devji Maharaj, Vihangam Yoga has reached more than 45 countries and has transformed lives of more than 5 million people worldwide. Our operational headquarters, which is also the international headquarters, is located on the bank of Holy River Ganga in Prayagraj in India. It is also an affiliated member of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. These satsangs are based on what is written in Swarved, the constitution of spirituality. Hence, we need to make a mention of the Swarved Mahamandir. Swarved Mahamandir is located in Varanasi, India, and can house 20,000 practitioners at any given time. This was inaugurated by our Honorable Prime Minister in 2021. Visiting the Swarved Mahamandir should be on the bucket list of everyone listening to this satsang. I had an opportunity to visit the Swarved Mahamandir in January 2019 when the construction was still in progress, and I had the divine blessing of getting initiated to the meditation technique right inside the premise. Now we move on, and before we begin the session, let's start with Swagat and Mangalgan, which is a welcome song and a small prayer for world peace and prosperity, seeking blessings from the Holy Master. Before we begin this session, for the benefit of those who do not know Hindi, I will briefly explain the meaning of these two chants. The welcome song or the Swagat Gan. This song is composed by Sri Sadguru Sadafal Devji Maharaj to welcome the eternal Sadguru entity. In this welcome song, a prayer has been made to the eternal Sadguru entity to bless us so that the spiritual message can be disseminated throughout the world. It has also been prayed to bestow the praying devotees with special energy and to protect and preserve the mantle of Sadguru in the world, which has been bestowed by the eternal Sadguru entity itself. The song for peace and prosperity, or the Mangalgan, This prayer for world peace and prosperity has been composed once again by World Guru Sri Swamiji while in the highest state of yogic meditation. Meditation practitioners are instructed to make this prayer on a regular basis from their platform of meditation for the sustenance of world peace and prosperity in all nations of the world. I would now like to invite Chandanji, a very dedicated, relentless devotee of the Holy Master, a selfless volunteer who is one of the backbones of Vihangam Yoga Singapore and its operations, to chant the Swagat and Mangal Gan for us. Over to you, Chandanji.
Thank you so much, Srinivasji. Jai Sadhudev to everyone. Swagat Gan and Mangal Gan. आज स्वागत नित्य गुरुवर संत शुभागम आइए, अध्यात्म विद्या दिव्य ज्योति सोमरस बरसाइए, दोष दुर्गुण दूर करिके शुद्ध हंस बनाइए, भेद गम गति ज्ञान गर्जन शक्ति द्वार हटाइए, कुले द्वारा शब्द सागर भक्त जन अनवाइए, जन सदा फल विश्व शिक्षक सान मान बचाइए, आज स्वागत नित्य गुरुवर संत शुभागम आइए। मंगल गान। विश्व शांति नाम मंगल परम गुरु को ध्याइए, वर्ग द्वंद्व शांति दूर कर भाव भेद मिटाइए, सार्वभौम समष्टि सत्ता ध्यात्म राज्य बनाइए, भेष भाषा भाव जग में ज्ञान पर दर्शाइए, समृद्धि सुख शांति धरातल स्वर्ग भूमि बनाइए, विश्व शिक्षक जन सदा फल नीति स्वर अपनाइए, विश्व शांति नाम मंगल परम गुरु को ध्याइए। Yes, Gurudev. Back to you, Srinivasji.
Thank you, Chandanji, for the divine recital. Without further ado, let me introduce the speaker of today's talk. The speaker is Mr. Saurabh Sinha, who definitely needs to be introduced for the wonderful work that he does and an amazing profile that he carries, though he never speaks about. Saurabh began his humble journey from Ranchi, a city which is now located in the state of Jharkhand in India. His academic journey from St. Xavier's School in Ranchi to the University of Delhi, where he concluded with an MBA in finance after completing his bachelor's degree in mining engineering from IIT BHU Varanasi. A spectacular career in finance that began with the Unit Trust of India, followed by stints in multinational companies in Hong Kong and Singapore, that concluded with being director of the Asian equities. An enviable and inspirational journey of Saurabh Sinha includes his association with Vihangam Yoga right from childhood, his own curiosity and inquisitiveness into the spiritual aspects, convincing belief and extensive study of Varsvarved, an exceptional speaker, motivator, and a humble human being, will be presenting the talk of today titled The Three Knots of Bondage, Understanding the Obstacle to the Soul's Liberation. Over to you, Saurabh.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Srinivas ji. Jai Sadgurudev. Hello, everybody. So, in our previous episodes, we have talked about the journey of the soul from bondage to salvation. So today we are going to reverse that journey. So we are going to examine the journey of the soul from its being in a state of bliss with the Lord to its present state of bondage. Now, before we start today's discussion, recollect from the first episode that the soul, which is the topic of our discussion, and the soul has been a topic of discussion for the past few episodes. This soul is a subtle entity. It is a unipresent entity, which means it is limited to being present at one location at one point in time. It is a conscious entity. So conscious entities have three attributes. They have the desire or the resolve. They have the ability to act, to fulfill their resolves, and they have knowledge. And therefore, the soul has all three. But since it is unipresent, the knowledge is limited in relation to some other entities which are omnipresent. And finally, soul is also an eternal entity. It is one of the 6 eternal entities. What do we mean by being eternal? By saying that soul is an eternal entity, we mean that the soul has always been there and will always be there as a distinct entity. By eternal, we also mean that the soul has its own separate permanent existence. So the soul has not been created out of something, nor has anything been created out of it. The soul does not ever merge or dissolve into anything to the extent that it loses its own separate permanent existence. It is important to set this context before we embark on today's journey. Now, what is the default state of the soul? The basic construct of Brahmvidya is that the default state of the soul is a state of perpetual conscious samadhi with the Lord. In the state of samadhi, the soul loses its sense of itself being the meditator, the Lord being the target of meditation, and the process of meditation itself, as its consciousness is completely immersed in the bliss of the Supreme Being. So you can say that the soul virtually loses its sense of existence in this state due to the intensity of its engrossment with the blissful Supreme Being. This is called the unison of the soul and the Supreme Being. Now, in the samadhi state of yoga meditation, the soul acquires the form and properties of the Supreme Being, just like an iron rod immersed in fire acquires the form and properties of fire. But note here that as the iron rod does not become fire, and also when the iron rod is taken out of fire, it comes back to its original form of being an iron, so does the soul after coming out of the state of samadhi. So in the state of samadhi, the soul experiences the bliss of the Lord, but it does not become the Lord himself, because, as we said in the beginning, two eternal entities cannot merge. They both have their eternal, independent existence. The soul and the Supreme Being are two eternal entities. They are separate entities. It's just that they achieve oneness, which is akin to the iron rod immersed in fire, which acquires the properties of fire and becomes one with it, although it maintains its separate existence at the same time. The soul can never become the supreme being. Now, here comes the discussion of the first knot of bondage, which is the knot of ignorance. The first knot of bondage begins to form when the soul, which was in a state of samadhi with the Lord, begins to believe due to ignorance that I am the supreme being. The moment this thought comes within the soul, it forgets its true form. This, you can say, is kind of an egoistic state of the soul. The moment this kind of a thought comes, the state of the soul changes from the swan state or the Hans state to the detached state or the Kavalya state. So I am the supreme being is the egoistic thought which is responsible for the downfall of the soul. Now, for the servant to believe that he is the master and that everything else or everybody else is no different from him is a thought that can arise only due to ignorance. And this is the root cause of downfall of the soul and is also therefore the root cause for the first knot. Now, when this ego develops within the soul, it leaves the nectarous supreme being, suffers a downfall. It was earlier in the swan state. Now it comes into the Kavalya state. Now, Kavalya state or the detached body is a state or a body where the soul is neither here nor there. It is neither completely predisposed towards Prakriti or illusory nature, and neither has it truly forgotten its swan state. In other words, the soul is in a state of confusion and doubt in this state of Kavalya. This is the state of ignorance, where the soul begins to assume itself to be the supreme being, and it marks the downward journey, the beginning of it, of the soul towards bondage with Prakriti. So Kavalya is a state of confusion of the pure soul, in which it is neither here nor there, neither is it fully connected with the Lord, nor is it fully connected with Prakriti. And at the same time, the soul has begun to think that it is no different from the supreme being. This soul is still in its conscious form, although there is no lure of Prakriti at this stage. So Prakriti does not have a role to play in the creation of the first knot of ignorance. Now, when the soul loses its pure form and descends with a strong desire to enjoy sensory gratification, there is a reduction in its level of knowledge. Now, this state in which the soul is ignorant, it is now no longer in the blissful state with the Lord, yet it is still in its conscious form. This is the mega causal state or the Mahakaran Sharir. In other words, the Mahakaran Sharir or the mega causal state is a state of the soul where it has suffered a downgrade in its knowledge level. At the same time, it has believed itself to be no different from that of the Lord. And this is the state where it begins to generate a strong desire or a strong will to venture into Prakriti. Why? To enjoy its entrapments. Now, again, note that there is no association of the soul with Prakriti or inert nature at this state. So the detached and mega-causal states are both manifestations of doubt of the soul in its own form. And in particular, the Mahakaran Sharir is acquired by the soul in its downward journey from the state of salvation, when the soul has a strong desire, or it has developed a strong desire to perform deeds and bear their consequences in the mortal world of Prakriti. So what we can do, we can establish that the desire for sensory gratification, which emanates in the soul due to its ignorance, is the root cause of the association of the soul with Prakriti or illusory nature. Now, what happens next? Next, the soul associates with Prakriti. So far, it was out of Prakriti. It was way beyond Prakriti. Now, it enters the realm of Prakriti. When it so does, the Mahakaran Sharir, or the mega-causal state, now changes to the Karan Sharir, or the causal state. In this state, the soul makes its first association with the root Prakriti, or the subtle Prakriti. And when it makes this association, it now gets attached with the three attributes of root Prakriti, which are the Sat, Raj, and Tam. We will discuss this in detail later on during this presentation. But for now, this association of the soul with Prakriti and its three attributes becomes the inspiration for the outward flow of energy of the soul. This conscious soul now has become associated with inert Prakriti, and this is the Karan Sharir. This association, as you can see, is of the inert Prakriti with the conscious soul. And just to give a sense of how this stage feels like, imagine the state of deep slumber for yourself. In this state, your soul is completely dissociated from your gross body and the subtle body, and is based entirely on its Karan Sharir, or the causal form. So this is the state of the soul when it just enters into Prakriti. Now, this is the association which is the cause of bondage of the soul, and later because of this, the soul enters into the unending cycle of births and rebirths of this sorrowful world. Now, before we continue on the further downward journey of the soul, let us take a detour here to understand more about Prakriti, because the hitherto conscious soul, which was once way beyond Prakriti, has now entered the domain of this inert Prakriti. So what is Prakriti? Prakriti, which you can call as illusory nature, because there is no clear word in English which can describe it completely. Prakriti is one of the 6 eternal entities. So in its very basic form, it is represented by subtle atoms. Now, subtle atoms are not the atoms which you see with the help of the electron microscope. These are atoms which are even subtler, which cannot be seen, but they exist in the spiritual world. And along with the subtle atoms, there are the 3 attributes of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. When these 3 attributes are in equivalence, this is the state of root Prakriti. Root Prakriti has a finite boundary. Its perimeter is limited to 1/4 of the total expanse of the Supreme Being. The mortal, destructible, ever-changing universe that we see around us and in which we live has been created by this root Prakriti. So you can say that just as earthen vessels are made out of clay, gold ornaments are made out of gold. Similarly, this huge universe has been made through the distortions and deformities of root Prakriti. How? By distorting the equivalence of its three attributes of Sat, Raj, Tam. These three attributes of Prakriti are present in all objects of the mortal world in different proportions. There is vibration and motion in this universe at every moment. And until the subtle atoms have vibration and motion, this universe is preserved and maintained. When this vibration and motion of the atom ceases, the destruction of the universe occurs. And creation and destruction of the universe are responsibilities of Prakriti. Now, as we said earlier, Prakriti is inert. It does not have vibration or motion or action by itself because it is not a conscious entity. Only conscious entities have the desire or resolve, have the ability to act, to fulfill those resolves and have knowledge. Inert entities like Prakriti do not have these attributes. So Prakriti cannot have vibration or motion or action by itself. In the light of the Supreme Being, the Akshar Brahma, which is one of the other six entities, a conscious entity, it creates the action of vibration in these atoms. And as we saw earlier, these atoms are the building blocks of subtle nature or root Prakriti. And when Akshar Brahma sets them into motion, or basically it gets them going, it results in the creation of the universe. Therefore, the Akshar Brahma is the ultimate cause of the universe. Otherwise, an inert entity like the universe cannot exist and be active by itself. There is no action of its own in inert Prakriti. The association with the conscious Supreme Being through the Akshar Brahma is the cause of action in this inert world. So in conclusion, on our detour on Prakriti, we need to differentiate between the eternal entity, which is the root Prakriti, from its manifestation, which is this mortal world that we see around us, which is subject to creation and destruction. So the mortal world, which is the creation of root Prakriti, is subject to creation and destruction. But the root Prakriti itself exists eternally in the form of subtle atoms with their three attributes. Also, remember that Prakriti is not a conscious entity. While it is eternal, it is inert at the same time. Therefore, it requires the association with a conscious entity like the Supreme Being or the Eternal Sadguru or the Akshar Brahma or even the soul to be put into action or motion. So now let's come back to our original topic. So recall that our soul has entered the domain of Prakriti, intending to enjoy its various entrapments. So why is this association of the soul with Prakriti a knot? This is a knot because the conscious soul here is associating with inert Prakriti. And this relationship is neither natural nor normal. Two similar substances can have a stable and lasting relationship. For example, the relationship between wood and wood, between iron and iron will be a stable one. But the relationship between wood and iron is not. Similarly, the pure soul and the Supreme Being are both conscious entities, and they are devoid of the attributes of Prakriti. The devotion occurs through association of these two entities. This relationship between the Supreme Being and soul is a natural one, whereas the relationship between the soul and Prakriti is an unnatural one and at the same time, it is an adversarial one. Therefore, this relationship becomes the basis of a knot which binds the soul to Prakriti, and in so doing, it takes the soul further away from its natural abode, which is the abode of the Supreme Being. As a result of falling into the clutches of Prakriti, the soul, the conscious soul, which had three original attributes of desire, resolve, and knowledge, acquires three additional attributes. What are these three additional attributes? One is happiness, but don't confuse happiness with bliss. Happiness is different from bliss. Bliss is eternal happiness. The happiness that we are talking about in the context of the soul getting associated with Prakriti is temporary happiness. What is the second attribute? Sorrow. There is no sorrow outside the domain of Prakriti. Similarly, there is no happiness outside the domain of Prakriti. There is only bliss. And the third attribute, which the soul acquires due to its association with Prakriti, is jealousy or animosity. That is called dvesh in Hindi. This is also not there outside Prakriti. So, because of these three additional attributes which are now within this soul, inside the clutches of Prakriti, several vices like attachment, treachery, deception, cheating, they emerge. They tie our lives, further causing our downfall. The fury of Prakriti pervades everywhere. So let us now examine how the soul acquires vices in the process of getting integrated with Prakriti. Now we know that knowledge, desire, effort, these are attributes naturally present in the soul. It performs deeds through its naturally present desire and effort because it's a conscious entity. Now, if this soul was in a completely knowledgeable state, it would have chosen to perform deeds of a special kind in the realm of consciousness. Deeds performed in the realm of consciousness are separate from deeds which are performed within the realm of Prakriti. Now, since our soul has suffered a downgrade in its level of knowledge due to the first knot of ignorance, in this state, the soul has a strong desire to conduct deeds of a different kind. Now it wants to enjoy the objects of the mortal world. And when some of these worldly desires are not fulfilled and face obstacles, it leads to the creation of anger in the person who is craving for such desires. As a result, what happens? The anger destroys intellect. And if the intellect is destroyed, the analytical abilities of the intellect are also destroyed. As a result, what happens? The sense of righteousness gets destroyed. All happening due to the veil of ignorance, which completely drapes this person. Such a person displays inappropriate behavior in a bid to fulfill his burning desires and ends up destroying his entire life. So this unsatiated, lusty person destroys good deeds through anger and bad behavior. He becomes completely indiscriminate. He's engulfed by anger, jealousy. He's too obstinate to change his behavior and see reason. This is the symptom of anger and jealousy, which emanates from lust and attachment due to obstacles which come in the way of fulfillment of these desires. Therefore, lust and anger are the cause of moral deprivation. Anger destroys the body as well as wealth. Intellect disappears in this state, leading to anxiety and disquiet in life. It destroys happiness, all the virtues which exist in the world. And such a worldly life becomes tumultuous, completely depraved. So lust is never completely fulfilled. That is it. That is the problem. It always leaves a desire and greed for more. The outward flow of greed to catch worldly pleasures is always there. The lusty person is completely outward oriented through his senses. He does not have any sense of his inner self because he's never satiated. He's just looking for more and more desire. Is desiring for more and more pleasure of the mortal world. And this desire or this greed keeps increasing over time, does not let the person ever have peace in the inner self. Even if all the material wealth of the world are in his possession, this greedy person will always crave for more because his mind is not pacified and satisfied by what he always has. In other words, lust can never be satisfied by more and more consumption of desire. It is like saying that you're trying to douse a fire by putting more and more straws into it. Lust can be destroyed only through intellect and reasoning and by getting detached from the desires. So now, as you can see, almost all living beings are caught in the bondage of this kind of attachment due to their being in a state of ignorance and darkness. The souls are far away from realizing their true state. They keep suffering the miseries of the bondages of the mortal world and its entrapments. This is the power of the second knot of Prakriti. Now let us get into the final knot, the knot that is created due to conduct of deeds. Earlier, we saw how the soul was in a swan state. It developed doubt and ignorance, gradually strengthened its feeling of separatedness from the Lord. It started equating itself with the majesty of the Lord, developed a strong desire to descend into the mortal world, to conduct deeds and enjoy the various objects of entrapment. This conduct of deeds in the mortal world is the cause of the third knot, which binds the soul, and by so doing, it prevents, delays, negates the liberation and salvation of the soul. So let us examine how exactly this algorithm of deeds functions in the mortal world. So the doer performs deeds through senses. The conscious soul is the ultimate doer of the good and bad deeds through the senses. What happens as a result? It has to bear the consequences of its performed deeds. The doer he's conscious, he's independent, but the bearer of the consequence is dependent. So in this case, the soul is the doer as well as the bearer of the deeds and their consequences. Because all actions which are being performed by the senses are actually being performed by the soul. So the soul is ultimately responsible for bearing the consequences. So when the soul performs good and bad deeds through its association with the mind and senses, it receives pleasure and pain, because you recollect that happiness and sorrow have now been infused into the soul as additional attributes. So it receives pleasure and pain because of conduct of deeds, and it is also bound to face the consequence of its performed deed. Now, some of these consequences can be separated in time, or it can be divorced from the time of the actual conduct of deeds. So in some cases, the soul has got to wait to bear the unexpired consequences of its old deeds. In the process of waiting, it conducts new deeds. Therefore, the performance of deeds never really stops for the soul, and it is always trapped in this vicious cycle of births and rebirths, because it has got to bear the unexpired consequences of past performed deeds. And in this waiting, it cannot stop it has to conduct new deeds. Therefore, new unexpired consequences get built up, and this cycle continues. So all auspicious and not so good deeds of the mind are causes of bondage. Whether a deed that has been conducted is a good deed or a bad deed, there is a consequence which has to be borne. So irrespective of whether we are performing good deeds or bad deeds in the realm of Prakriti, we are still in bondage. Therefore, what happens? The soul, bound by these deeds, is forced to assume different body forms and successive births. Once it takes birth in any human body form, it conducts more deeds and also accumulates more unexpired consequence balance. Where in other body forms other than humans, fresh deeds are not conducted, only expiration of the unexpired consequences of past deeds happens. And this cycle continues. There are various kinds of people in the world. They are various because their deeds conducted are there are a variety of deeds which have been conducted by them. They have different attributes, mannerisms, unexpired consequences of the past deeds. So therefore, there are these infinite souls with infinite kinds of karmic balances. And this is the reason why the variety exists in this world. Because variety of deeds have been conducted, therefore there are a variety of consequences that the soul needs to bear. And for this to happen, the world also needs to have variety in itself, so that the consequences that have to be borne by the souls they also have variety. The other consequence is that the living beings are predisposed to certain deeds because of past memories of those deeds from previous births. So therefore, there is this cycle of births and rebirths. The ordinary cause of the universe is the variety of deeds conducted by the living beings. And this is the third knot, the conduct of deeds and the bearing of consequences, which keeps the soul bound in the shackles of Prakriti, away from its natural abode and bliss of the Lord. So to conclude, we the souls are trapped in three veils or knots. The first one is of ignorance. The second is due to the unnatural relationship between our conscious souls and the inert Prakriti. And the third is due to the conduct of deeds. These three veils or knots stand in our path of liberation or salvation. The only way to break out of these veils and untie these knots is through the acquisition of the knowledge of Brahm Vidya. And this is possible only when we consciously work towards enhancing our eligibility to be granted the knowledge that we require through the blessings of the Sadguru. As we have seen from a previous episode, the acquisition and enhancement of eligibility is possible through the 4S framework of Vihangam Yoga: the Seva, the service; the Satsang, or the company of the learned and the truthful; the Sadhana, or the meditation; and the Swadhyay, or the self-learning. So with this, I would like to conclude today's talk, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Saurabh, for the amazingly insightful talk. And definitely would not like to have you stop if this time clock was not ticking. I like the last slide always, where you give those 4 amazing and very simple ways of being. The command over the topic that you have generates curiosity. It is convincing. eye-opening, and very simplified in explanation. And I'm sure all attending this session would reciprocate with my thoughts in this regard. The way you present gives the listener an access to the vastness of the spiritual knowledge. The topics, the simple way in which you gave today's session, ignorance, what stops you from knowing? And knowledge is the only way to know beyond your own senses, Prakriti. And what I heard loudly is happiness is different from bliss. And algorithm of deeds is so wonderfully explained. The soul is the doer and the bearer of the consequence. Sounds so much like the corporate world today. The result is always a success, or if not, it's an experience for the next birth, if you put it in this perspective. Without any further delay, the chat box is open. The mute button is open for you all to just unmute yourself and speak. Raise your hand if you wish, but throw in your questions for this wonderful topic. Of course, I have a lot of questions and clarifications, but I'll leave it to you all first. You may even wish to share something that you got out of what Saurabh ji has said on this expansive topic. In the interest of time, I would like to invite Subhash ji for the closing remarks. He's joining us from Singapore and needs no introduction. Still, I would like to say that he is the main pillar of Vihangam Yoga Singapore team, a long-term practitioner of Vihangam meditation, an authorized trainer of the Vihangam meditation, and is a co-founder of Vihangam Yoga Singapore. Most importantly, is a true disciple of Swamiji. His life is an inspirational journey for all of us. He's always showing the path of Vihangam Yoga to us, a truly dedicated, highly inspired, energetic leader who leads from the front, and the best person whom we all probably have met. Thank you, Subhash. Please do give us your closing remarks. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Srinivas-ji. I was trying to listen what Saurabh was mentioning about the 3 knots of bondage. And at the same time, I was thinking and I was just trying to reconstruct myself that now, of course, those who all of us are listening to Saurabh, he explained so well each and every of these 3 items that at least theoretically, now we know and understand what exactly the problem is, where our problems lie, as far as spirituality is concerned, as far as our existence is concerned. But while I was just listening to him, I was thinking to connect all of these things with one specific thing. And he touched upon about that point as well, but probably at one of the session, probably we can have further more detailed discussion on this. And Saurabh mentioned that knowing these knots are very important, because unless and until we know, we cannot progress to eliminate this. And elimination can only happen once we surrender ourselves to the Master, to the Sadguru. So here is the point where I want to connect. Just to provide some information, just 2 days back in India and globally everywhere, not in Singapore that much, but we all celebrated the birth anniversary of current Master, Sadguru Swatantra Dev Ji Maharaj, 76th birth anniversary of Sadguru Swatantra Dev Ji Maharaj, who is the current Master leading the whole organization, and not just in terms of organizational way, but spiritually as well. I was thinking just to link one thing here, the name of the Sadguru. Swatantra is the name given. There are 3 reasons behind this name given, as per my understanding. Number 1 is he was appeared in 1947, and on 28th of July as per English calendar. And that's how his name was given by Sadguru Sadafal Dev Ji Maharaj. as Swatantra, means free. So India was being declared free at that time point. That's why his name was given as Swatantra. India, the country itself, is being freed. There are two more reasons behind that. Number one is the one who is free himself. So the person, the special soul who is Sadguru, he is free from all the bondage. Probably one day we can have a detailed discussion about what the entity Sadguru is about. But he himself is free. He is here. And the third reason is he is here to free others. Others, eligible ones. Free from what? Free from where? Free from these three knots, actually, which are our main hurdles. The ego, which Saurabh mentioned, is the number one, and it exists not at just right now at this stage, but as and when we elevate ourselves to the highest stage, this ego will still persist, and only devotion to the Sadguru can let it be eliminated completely. So it's the Sadguru who only can save all of us, all those eligible ones. The bondage, the entrapment into which we all are, is not a cup of tea for all of us to break by ourselves. Not possible at all. It has never been happened for anyone other than the Sadguru himself. Without the blessings of the Sadguru, it has not been possible for anyone to come out from these three knots, the bondage of these three knots. And that's why whenever we read Swarved, whenever we discuss about Vihangam Yoga, whenever we discuss about Sadguru, the ultimate most important thing which appears all the time is surrender yourself to the master. There is no any other way. There is really no any other way. Why? Because time is important. The time given to us is very important. We keep on trying things on our own basis. To what extent you go, you never know. And to what extent you will achieve, you also don't know. But Sadguru is the authorized one, authorized from the Supreme Being, authorized by the Adi Guru. The current master is authorized to free you. Make yourself as eligible as possible so that you can receive the blessings of the master. And once that starts being poured to you, your life is settled. We say, are you settled in your life? Okay, in terms of a spiritual world or spiritual words, are you settled? So being settled means the day you become eligible and the day you have started receiving the blessings of the master and then continued that maintenance, you are settled. Then you don't have to do anything else other than what you are doing, actually, because the rest other things completely depend on Sadguru himself. And the time will come automatically. That's what Swamiji has mentioned. अद्भुत मार्ग योग विहंगम मैं तुमको बतलाऊंगा यदि विधिवत तुम साधन करी हो अमर लोक पहुंचाऊंगा. So at the end, Saurabh mentioned the 4S. That's the thing which we have to do. And the ultimate objective for doing those 4S, the sadhana, seva, satsang, and swadhyay, are basically to make ourselves as eligible as possible so that the blessings of the master starts pouring on us. It is there. It's just that we are not eligible enough to retain it within ourselves. And once we continue our journey, putting our effort with all these 4S, we become more and more eligible. And it's the master who will take these three bondage, these three knots away from us, and we will be successful as a human being, because the ultimate objective of being this human life is to understand why it has been given, why this life has been given, and what is the real objective, and how to progress on that path to attain and complete that objective. That is the ultimate one. And that is only possible once we are blessed by the Sadguru. And that is possible once we have surrendered ourselves to the master. Surrendering to the master, the biggest challenge is to anyone and everyone. The biggest challenge is the ego itself. We cannot surrender to anyone till the time we have our own ego between me and the person or to whatever entity we are talking about in between. If the ego is there, I will not be able to surrender myself. So the very first thing, whenever we talk about Sadhguru, whenever we talk about Vihangam Yoga, the very first thing comes into the picture is surrender yourself to the master. Surrendering yourself to the master means there should not be any ego between you with respect to the master himself. What is the meaning of that? The meaning of that is take his words as those are. No mixing up your thoughts processes, your intellect, your understanding, anything. First, take those words as it is. Whatever has been mentioned to you, whatever has been mentioned to me, whatever have I heard, I have to take those as it is. That's why in Saurabh Swamiji has mentioned the voice of Sadhguru is called Apta voice, Apta Vani, which is one of the proof for the existence of anything. So where the problem is, the problem exists with ourselves. Knowing theoretically is, as in the previous satsang also, we mentioned about this, that knowing theoretically is one aspect, but we have to implement those things in our day-to-day life. And that's why, please, engross yourself in those 4 S: sadhana, swadhyaya, seva, and satsang. Satsang we are doing, sadhana, meditation we are doing, swadhyaya is important. In that swadhyaya, introspection is very important. If I consider, say for example, myself, if I consider that, oh, I'm doing so many things for Vihangam Yoga, etc., this, that, etc., I don't need to do anything else. No, it is not the right concept for me. I also have to continue my practice. I also have to do introspection within myself to identify where the problem could be, or is there some trigger happening here and there, and so on and so forth. So introspection is very important, and that's why Swarved is available. Each and every word in Swarved guides us. What is the meaning of guiding us? Means each and every word of Swarved is applicable to us and should be taken in such a way that we are utilizing it as it is in our day-to-day life. As and when we progress on that, we will automatically get refined and become more and more and more eligible, and these 3 knots will automatically be taken away and it will be destroyed. So ultimately, surrender yourself to the master. That is the most important thing and will remain the most important thing throughout. Thank you very much, Srinivasji, for giving me time. Back to you. Jai Sadhguru.
Thank you, Subhashji, for the powerful closing remarks. And thank you for your regular presence and unwavering support to all seekers in any part of the world. I completely agree with you. These sessions probably would need to be turned to classrooms the way Saurabh creates this. And I was having the 4 S's in my last line to be put before I close, but you have already emphasized on those 4, very important. And to make these sessions successful and presentable, there's a lot of activity that goes on. I don't need to take any names. Thank you, a very big thank you to all those who are involved. It's the Zoom, it's the timing, it's the WhatsApp information, putting it on the Facebook, operating the Facebook page. There's a lot of work that goes on. And I thank you all from the bottom of my heart for being part of the seva that forms part of one of the 4 S's that Saurabh mentions. And it's very important to be associated. Please do connect with any of us on any of the platforms in case you wish to be part of any activity, and we look forward to being associated with you all. We should go on to the, without further ado, we must go straight to the Shanti part as we are at the closing. And as I promised, we close at 12 p.m. For Shanti part, I would like to invite Pranavji. Pranavji is a young practitioner. He is an amazing kid, and I can't say much about him. He's a lovely, wonderful kid. And I must mention the 2 parents, Omji and his wife, to having taken all the efforts to bring him to be associated with this wonderful sessions. Over to you, Pranavji, for the Shanti part.
जय सद्गुरुदेव। शांति पाठ। हे प्रभु शांति स्वरूप हो, शांति शांतिमय शांति, शांति शांति जन शांति हो, पूर्ण शांतिमय शांति। हे प्रभु शांति प्रदान कर, दूर हो सर्व अशांति। देव सदा फल शांतिमय, शांति शांति सुख शांति, शांति शांति सुख शांति। Thank you, Jai Sadgurudev.
Thank you, Pranavji, for chanting the Shanti Path. And as the last slide shows, I invite everyone to visit the website, the Facebook page, and keep yourselves abreast of all the activities that are going on. The kids' meditation sessions, the morning and evening guided meditation and breathing sessions, and the various activities that we are planning in the next 3 months are available on the website. I invite everyone to please visit the website and get yourself acquainted. If you all want to take a picture of the on the screen, you can take. These are the timings on which the meditation sessions are held. Please do join from anywhere at any time that is convenient to you. Thank you very much for everyone for being here, for making this a success, for all those on the Facebook, and for those all who have not been able to present. Please do go through this session, which is very insightful, and I look forward to seeing all of you in the next session, and the topic will be announced very soon. Thank you very much, everyone. Over to you, Tandanji.